The sound of water running at 3 in the morning wasn't supposed to be there. Preston stood frozen in his penthouse kitchen doorway, watching a stranger's hands, thin, trembling, covered in grease stains, scrub his family's dinner plates like her life depended on it. The girl couldn't have been older than 18. Her waitress uniform hung off sharp shoulders. Dark circles carved shadows so deep beneath her eyes, they looked like bruises. She didn't see him, didn't hear him. Just kept washing, with the mechanical rhythm of someone who'd forgotten how to stop. This was Rosa's daughter, the one his housekeeper never talked about, the one who was supposed to be at school. But school doesn't explain why a teenager is in a billionaire's kitchen at 3 a.m., hands shaking so badly the plates almost slip. It doesn't explain the dried tears on her face, or why, when she finally noticed him standing there, her first instinct wasn't surprise, it was shame. What Preston would uncover wasn't just a secret, it was a sacrifice so profound it would force him to question everything he believed about dignity, pride, and the invisible people who keep his world running. And when the truth finally surfaced, he'd face a choice that money couldn't solve, one that would either destroy the fragile trust between them or prove that some debts can only be repaid with your whole heart. Preston Matthews had built his world on control. Every corner of his penthouse gleamed with the kind of perfection money could buy. Marble countertops reflecting city lights 40 floors below. Furniture arranged with mathematical precision. Silence that cost more than most people's monthly rent. 3 years ago, after his wife left him for a tech entrepreneur, he'd stripped away everything that reminded him of her. What remained was clean, cold, functional. The only warmth came from his son Caleb's bedroom, where toy trucks lined shelves and drawings covered walls. At 6 years old, Caleb was the one thing Preston couldn't control, the one variable that kept him human. And Rosa, quiet, efficient Rosa, who arrived each morning at 7 and left by 5. She was the invisible hand keeping their lives running smoothly. Rosa never spoke unless spoken to, moving through the apartment like a ghost. She anticipated needs before they were voiced, disappearing into the background the moment her tasks were complete. Preston knew almost nothing about her personal life except what appeared on her employment file. 45 years old, single mother, excellent references. In 3 years, she'd never been late, never called in sick, never asked for time off. She was the kind of employee people dreamed about. So reliable Preston had stopped noticing her presence entirely. That invisibility, he would later realize, was exactly what she'd been counting on. Because invisible people can hide the heaviest burdens, and Rosa had been carrying one that was slowly crushing her. That night, Preston had woken to Caleb's coughing around 2:45. The boy had a mild fever, nothing serious, but it pulled Preston from sleep. He padded downstairs in bare feet, heading for the kitchen where they kept children's medicine, when he heard it. Water running. His first thought was a burst pipe. His second was Rosa had forgotten to turn off the faucet. Neither explanation prepared him for what he found. The girl stood at the sink with her back to him, shoulders hunched, scrubbing a casserole dish with desperate intensity that suggested she was trying to erase more than food stains. Suds covered her forearms. Her dark hair had escaped from a ponytail that looked 3 days old. Preston cleared his throat. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a gunshot, and the girl spun around so fast the dish clattered into the sink. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Up close, she looked even younger, 18 at most, with Rosa's same dark eyes but sharper features, all angles and edges, where her mother was soft. The waitress uniform bore the logo of a 24-hour diner 3 neighborhoods away, the kind of place where coffee was terrible and tips were worse. Grease stains marked her shirt, and a fresh burn mark reddened her left wrist. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. "I'll go." She moved to step past him, but Preston found himself blocking the doorway. "Wait, who are you?" But he already knew. This was the daughter Rosa never mentioned, the one who existed only as a name on an emergency contact form. Nora. The girl looked at him with terror in her eyes, and Preston suddenly realized how this looked. A middle-aged man in pajamas cornering a teenage girl at night. He stepped back, hands raised. "I just want to know why you're here. Does your mother know?" Something shifted in Nora's expression. The fear didn't disappear, but hardened into defiance or resignation. "She asked me to come, to finish the dishes. She was too tired." The explanation landed between them like a stone. Rosa, who never left a task undone, who would rewash a perfectly clean glass, that Rosa was too tired? Preston looked at the mountain of plates still stacked beside the sink, remnants from his dinner party the night before. "What time did she leave?" Nora glanced at the microwave clock. 3:17. "Around midnight. I came after my shift ended." The casual way she said it, as if appearing at 3 in the morning to wash someone else's dishes was normal, as if her mother, being too exhausted, was just another detail, made something twist in Preston's chest. He looked at this girl, really looked at her. The trembling hands. The shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. The way she held herself, like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like not to be tired. "You're supposed to be in school," he said. Nora's jaw tightened. "I'm 18. I can make my own choices." She turned back to the sink, dismissing him, resuming scrubbing with mechanical efficiency. Preston stood watching water slide off plates, watching this stranger's daughter clean his life's debris at 3 in the morning, and felt something crack open inside him, a question he couldn't ignore, a wrongness he couldn't name. But Caleb was coughing upstairs, and the medicine was in the cabinet, and this girl had made clear she didn't want his attention. So Preston left her there. He climbed the stairs, gave Caleb his medicine, and sat on his son's bed until the boy fell back asleep. Through it all, he could hear water running below, steady and relentless as a heartbeat. When Preston came back downstairs 40 minutes later, the kitchen was spotless, and Nora was gone. Every dish gleamed. The counters shone. Even the floor had been mopped. It was as if she'd never been there, except for one detail Preston noticed turning off the light. On the kitchen table sat a neatly folded dish towel, and beneath it, a single $20 bill. Rosa's tip money, left to replace a glass Nora must have thought she'd chipped. Preston picked up the bill and held it under the light. And something about that gesture, this girl leaving money she clearly needed because she'd damaged something worth pennies, kept him awake the rest of the night. Morning came with its usual routine. Caleb's fever had broken, and he bounced around while Preston made breakfast, slightly rubbery scrambled eggs and slightly burned toast that Caleb ate with 6-year-old enthusiasm. Rosa arrived at 7 on the dot, wearing her usual uniform, simple black pants, white blouse, comfortable shoes designed for hours of standing. Her face gave away nothing as she moved through the apartment with customary efficiency, starting with Caleb's room while Preston got ready for work. 20 minutes later, Preston found her making Caleb's bed with hospital corners that would have impressed a drill sergeant. "Rosa," he said, and she turned with a polite, carefully blank expression. "Yes, Mr. Matthews?" The formal address had always bothered him, but he'd given up trying to change it. Some distances couldn't be bridged with casual first names. "I met your daughter last night. Nora. She was here finishing dishes around 3 in the morning." Rosa's hand stilled on the pillowcase she'd been smoothing. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Fear. Shame. Anger. Then the mask slid back. "I apologize. It won't happen again. I should have finished the work myself." She turned back to the bed, tucking sheets with precise movements, but Preston noticed her hand shaking slightly. "Rosa, I'm not upset about the dishes. I'm concerned your daughter is here at 3 in the morning instead of in bed. She looks exhausted." Rosa's voice was carefully neutral. "Nora is 18. She makes her own choices. I cannot control what she does." The words echoed what Nora had said, almost verbatim, as if they'd rehearsed this response. Preston studied Rosa's rigid posture. The way she kept her face turned away. 3 years she'd worked for him, and he'd never seen her anything but perfectly composed. "Is everything okay? With you, I mean. You left early last night. That's not like you." Rosa smoothed the same section of bedspread 3 times before answering. "I was tired. I'm getting older. Sometimes the work is harder than it used to be." The admission seemed to cost her something. Preston recognized that same iron grip on dignity in Rosa's voice. "If you need to adjust your hours," he started, but Rosa cut him off with a headshake. "No adjustments needed. I will finish all tasks during scheduled time. My daughter will not return. I apologize for any inconvenience." She picked up her cleaning caddy and moved past him into the hallway, conversation clearly over. Preston wanted to push deeper. But Rosa's walls were up and reinforced. He let her go, but the unease from the night before had settled deeper into his chest. That afternoon, while Rosa vacuumed and Caleb was at his playdate, Preston did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He opened Rosa's employment file. Her address was listed as a small apartment building 40 minutes away by bus, probably an hour by unreliable public transit. Emergency contact. Nora, age 18, daughter. No other family. No spouse, parents, siblings, just the 2 of them. He pulled up Street View, the kind of place where security bars covered windows and graffiti marked walls. Not dangerous necessarily, but tired. Worn down. The kind of neighborhood where people worked 3 jobs and still struggled with rent. Preston closed the laptop, feeling like he'd violated something. But the image stayed with him. Rosa taking 2 buses every morning, going home to that neighborhood, to an apartment she shared with a daughter she never mentioned. Nora appearing at 3 in the morning with grease stains and $20 clutched tight. That evening after Rosa left, and Caleb was occupied with building blocks, Preston did something he felt guilty about. He typed Nora's full name into search, combined with scholarship in high school. What he found made him set his phone down and stare for a long minute. Nora Delgado had been profiled in the local paper 8 months ago. Local student overcomes adversity to earn full scholarship. The article featured her in school uniform, smiling, holding an acceptance letter. She'd been accepted into a prestigious university's pre-med program with a full ride covering tuition and living expenses, set to start fall after graduation. The article mentioned her mother briefly, single mother who works as housekeeper to support daughter's dreams. It praised Nora's dedication, volunteer work at a free clinic, perfect grades. The girl in that photo looked nothing like the exhausted stranger washing dishes in his kitchen. That girl had been full of hope. The one he'd met looked like hope was something she'd read about once. Preston scrolled through more results. He found the graduation schedule. Nora's class had graduated 6 months ago. But if she'd graduated, if she'd had a full scholarship waiting, why was she wearing a waitress uniform at 3 in the morning? Why wasn't she at college pursuing the medical degree the article said she'd dreamed about since age 10? Nothing made sense, and Preston couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening in Rosa's life, whatever had driven Nora to give up a full scholarship and work through the night, it was something terrible. The next day, Preston did something he wasn't proud of, but couldn't avoid. He called in sick, something he never did, and followed Rosa when she left at 5. He kept his distance, feeling like a stalker, but he needed to understand. Rosa took 2 buses, transferring downtown, then heading into a neighborhood that looked worse in person. She moved slowly, like each step cost something. She stopped twice to rest, leaning against buildings, and Preston saw her press a hand to her chest both times. Saw the grimace she couldn't hide. Rosa entered a building with peeling paint and broken security door. Preston waited 5 minutes, then followed. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor with no elevator. Preston climbed the stairs and found 3B, pressed his ear to the door, feeling absurd and intrusive, but unable to stop. He heard voices inside, Rosa's and another woman's, speaking rapid Spanish. He caught fragments. Doctora, cirugía, dinero, no hay manera. Doctor, surgery, money. No way. His Spanish was rusty, but the desperation was universal. Preston backed away from the door, heart pounding. Rosa was sick. Sick enough to need surgery, and whatever was wrong, she didn't have money to fix it. He left the building and sat in his car for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to do. He could confront Rosa directly, but she'd already made clear she didn't want help. He could hire a private investigator, but that felt like worse violation. Or he could do what he should have done months ago, actually pay attention to the person who'd been taking care of his life for 3 years, actually see her as a human being with problems and fears and needs. Preston drove to the hospital where his company did charitable donations. He had contacts there, people who owed him favors. One phone call led to another, and by closing time, he'd assembled enough information to make his hands shake. Rosa Delgado had been diagnosed with severe mitral valve regurgitation 4 months ago. Her heart was literally failing, valve by valve, beat by beat. She needed surgery, but the condition wasn't considered immediately life-threatening by insurance standards, just progressively debilitating. Without insurance, the cost was approximately $150,000. The hospital had helped her apply for assistance programs, but most had waiting lists measured in years. One did not wait years for a heart failing by degrees. Preston sat in the parking garage gripping his steering wheel, trying to understand how someone could work a full day with a failing heart. How they could smile and say, "Yes, Mr. Matthews," while knowing their body was betraying them, cell by cell. He thought about Rosa's careful words that morning. "I am getting older. Not sick, not dying, just older." As if what was happening was natural, instead of preventable with money, Preston spent on wine without thinking twice. He drove home slowly, mind racing. Rosa was dying. Nora had given up her entire future to try saving her mother, working multiple jobs, sacrificing scholarship, dreams, everything. And they'd hidden it so well, Preston hadn't noticed anything wrong until he'd literally stumbled over evidence at 3 a.m. The invisibility Rosa had cultivated had become a shroud-hiding tragedy unfolding right in front of him. That night, Preston couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the $20 bill, about grease stains, about Rosa pressing her hand to her chest, climbing those stairs. He thought about Caleb healthy and happy, tried to imagine having to choose between his son's future and his own life. The weight would crush anyone. It was crushing Nora. By 2 a.m, Preston had made a decision. He didn't know if it was right. He didn't know if Rosa would accept help or if Nora would hate him for interfering. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't watch Rosa die. He couldn't watch Nora destroy herself trying to save her mother. He had the money. That was supposed to mean something. That had to mean something. Preston pulled out his laptop and started making calls, leaving messages for lawyers and financial advisors, anyone who could help him figure out how to help someone who didn't want to be helped. By dawn, he had the outline of a plan. It wasn't perfect. It would probably make Rosa angry, but it might save her life, and that was all that mattered. The next week passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings. Preston worked with the hospital's financial aid coordinator, a woman named Patricia who understood exactly what he was trying to do. They set up an anonymous donation to the hospital's indigent care fund, $300,000, enough for Rosa's surgery plus several others, making it look less like targeted charity. The hospital would reach out to Rosa as part of regular financial assistance outreach, telling her she'd been approved for a program she'd applied for months ago. It wasn't quite a lie, but wasn't quite truth either. Preston signed papers, wrote the check, felt like he was betraying Rosa's trust, even as he tried to save her life. When Patricia called to tell him the hospital had contacted Rosa, Preston held his breath. "She cried," Patricia said quietly. "She kept asking if we were sure, if there hadn't been a mistake." She'd given up hope. Preston closed his eyes and pressed his hand against his chest, feeling his own healthy heart beating strong and steady. Rosa would live. Whatever happened next, whatever anger or resentment came from this, Rosa would live. That had to be enough. Rosa came to work an hour late the next day, eyes red from crying, but something different in her face, a lightness, relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. She found Preston in his study and stood in the doorway, struggling with what to say. "Preston," she said, using his first name for the first time ever. "I received news about my medical situation. I've been approved for a program that will cover my surgery. I wanted you to know, because I may need time off for recovery." Her voice broke on the last word. Preston stood and crossed to her. "Take all the time you need. Your job will be here, and you'll still be paid full salary, however long you're out." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "That's too generous. You don't have to." But Preston shook his head. "Rosa, you've taken care of my home and son for 3 years. Let me take care of you while you recover. Please." For a moment, Rosa waged an internal battle. Then she nodded slowly, and before Preston could react, she stepped forward and hugged him, quick and awkward but genuine. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you." Then she pulled away and hurried toward the kitchen, and Preston heard her crying softly. He left her alone with her relief and fear, and overwhelming gratitude for a miracle she thought came from bureaucratic luck, rather than from the man standing 20 feet away. The deception felt heavier than Preston had expected, but Rosa was going to live. That was all that mattered. That evening, Preston's doorbell rang. He opened it to find Nora standing there in her diner uniform, exhaustion carved into every line, but something else too. A spark that might have been hope or suspicion. "Can I come in?" she asked. Preston stepped aside, and Nora entered slowly, looking around the apartment she'd only seen at night. In warm evening light, everything probably looked different, less like a showcase, more like a home. They sat in the living room, and Nora stared at her hands before speaking. "My mom told me about the program, about the surgery being covered." She looked up, tears streaming. "But I know it's not a program. I know you did this somehow. I don't know how, but I know it was you." Preston had prepared for this moment, but facing Nora's raw emotion made planned words disappear. "Your mother's surgery is covered. That's all that matters." Nora shook her head. "No. What matters is truth. Did you pay for this?" Preston could lie, maintain the fiction, protect Rosa from knowledge that would wound her pride. But looking at Nora's face, he knew she deserved honesty. "Yes. I set up a fund at the hospital. Your mother was the first person it helped, but it'll help others too. She doesn't know it came from me. The hospital told her it was a program she'd applied for." Nora's hands clenched into fists. "So, you lied to her. You made her think it was something she earned when really it's just charity from a rich man who felt sorry for us. I gave your mother a chance to accept help without feeling like charity. There's a difference." Nora stood abruptly, pacing. "No, there isn't. You took away her choice. You decided what she needed without asking. And now she's going to go through with this surgery, thinking it's legitimate, and eventually, she's going to find out the truth, and it's going to destroy her. Preston leaned forward. Your mother was dying, Nora. Every day her heart got weaker. She would have kept working until she dropped dead, because that felt more dignified than accepting help. And you would have worked yourself into the ground, trying to save her, and it still wouldn't have been enough. So yes, I took away her choice. Because the only choice she was making was to die. It wasn't your decision to make. Nora's voice cracked. We're not your responsibility. My mom has lived her entire life on her own terms. She's never taken handouts. And now you've made her into someone who accepts charity even if she doesn't know it yet. You've stolen the one thing that mattered more to her than her own life. Preston absorbed her anger, understanding it. She was right in a way. He had stolen something, but he'd also saved a life. I gave her a chance to live. What she does with that life is still her choice. But she can't make choices if she's dead, Nora. Neither can you. Nora collapsed back onto the couch, anger draining away. She's going to find out eventually, and when she does, it's going to break something in her. Preston nodded slowly. Maybe. Probably. But she'll be alive to feel that way. And I can live with her anger. I can't live with doing nothing while she dies. They sat in silence, and Preston could hear Caleb playing in his room, making sound effects for imaginary adventures. The normalcy felt surreal. What do you want from us? Nora asked finally. Because nobody does something like this without wanting something back. Preston thought carefully. I want to believe that having money means something beyond just accumulating more of it. I want my son to grow up seeing that when you have power to help someone, you do it. And honestly, I want to feel like my life has purpose beyond just existing. You and your mother showed me what real love looks like, what sacrifice means. I'm not a hero, Nora. I just wrote a check. You're the one who gave up everything for your mother. Nora wiped her eyes. I don't know how to feel about this. I should be grateful. I am grateful. But I also feel like something's been stolen from us. Preston understood. Sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's wisdom. Your mother is going to have surgery. She's going to live. Focus on that. Everything else is just details. Nora left minutes later, still conflicted, still uncertain. Preston watched her go and wondered if he'd created different damage by helping. But the surgery was scheduled. Rosa would live. That had to be enough. Whatever came after, anger, resentment, complicated mess of gratitude mixed with wounded pride, he would deal with it. As long as Rosa survived, he could handle the rest. The surgery took place 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning. Preston cleared his entire schedule and arrived at dawn. Rosa was already there in a hospital gown, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. Nora sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand. Both women looked surprised when Preston walked in. You didn't need to come, Rosa said quietly. Preston pulled up a chair. Yes, I did. Your family, Rosa. I wanted to be here. Something in Rosa's expression softened, and she reached out to squeeze his hand. They sat together as minutes ticked by, waiting for the surgical team. Rosa was calm on the surface, but Preston could see fear in her eyes. This was major surgery. There were risks. She might not wake up. When they came to wheel Rosa away, she looked at her daughter. I love you. Everything I did was for you. Nora was crying openly. I know, Mama. I know. You're going to be fine. Rosa disappeared through double doors, and Nora collapsed into Preston's arms, sobbing. He held her awkwardly, not sure what to do, but she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. She has to be okay, Nora choked out. She has to be okay. Preston held her and made promises he had no power to keep, because sometimes that's all you can do. Offer comfort even when you can't guarantee outcomes. The surgery took 8 hours. Preston stayed the entire time sitting in the waiting room with Nora. They didn't speak much. The silence was heavy with fear and hope and strange intimacy of shared crisis. Finally, the surgeon emerged. The surgery went well. We replaced the damaged valve. Her heart function should improve significantly. She's in recovery now. You can see her soon. Nora's whole body sagged with relief. They were allowed into recovery an hour later. Rosa lay in bed, connected to various monitors, but her color was already better. She looked peaceful, years younger than she had in months. Nora pulled a chair to the bed and took her mother's hand. "I'm here, Mama. I'm right here." Preston stood by the door, and when Rosa's eyes fluttered open, she looked right at him. "Preston," she murmured, voice hoarse. "You came." He moved closer. "Of course I came. How are you feeling?" Rosa managed a weak smile. "Alive. I feel alive." Her eyes drifted closed again. Over the next 2 weeks, Preston visited daily. Sometimes he brought Caleb and Rosa's face would light up. Caleb would tell her about school, show her drawings, fill the room with his energy. Preston watched Rosa slowly get stronger, first sitting up, then taking short walks, then finally being cleared to go home. Through it all, Nora barely left her mother's side. On discharge day, Preston drove them home, helped Nora get Rosa up 3 flights of stairs, both supporting her weight. The apartment was tiny but immaculately clean, filled with touches that spoke of care. Flowers in a jar, photos on walls, a bookshelf made from milk crates holding Nora's medical textbooks. Preston looked around at this space representing everything they'd built together and understood why Rosa had fought so hard to maintain independence. This wasn't much, but it was earned. "Thank you," Rosa said from the couch, "for everything, for coming to the hospital, for keeping my job safe, for being kind to my daughter." Preston shook his head. "Rosa, you've taken care of my home and son while your own life was falling apart. That's heroic." Rosa laughed softly. "Not heroic, just necessary. What else was I supposed to do?" Preston didn't answer, but the question haunted him driving home. What else was she supposed to do? Accept help? Admit weakness? In Rosa's world, those weren't options. You worked until you couldn't work anymore, then worked anyway. That was reality of being poor, of being invisible, of knowing no one was coming to save you. Preston had saved her, yes, but it had taken 3 years to even notice she needed saving. Rosa recovered slowly over the next month. Preston kept paying full salary even though she wasn't working, and for once she didn't argue. She needed money, and she needed to heal. Nora cut back to more reasonable work hours, and Preston suspected Rosa had put her foot down. One evening, Preston got a call from Nora. "Can you come over? My mom wants to talk to you." Her voice was strange, tight. Preston's stomach dropped. This was it. Rosa had figured it out. He drove to their apartment with dread settling over him. Rosa was sitting at their small kitchen table when he arrived. She looked better. Color in face, weight starting to return. But her expression was serious. Nora stood by the window, arms crossed. "Sit down," Rosa said. Preston sat, heart pounding. "I need to ask you something, and I need truth. Did you pay for my surgery?" The question hung in the air. Preston could lie, but looking at Rosa's face, he knew she already knew. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." Rosa closed her eyes. "I thought so." The hospital called today. A woman wanted to do a follow-up interview about the Indigent Care Fund. She mentioned the fund had only been established weeks before my surgery, that the initial donation was quite large. I asked how many patients had been helped so far. She opened her eyes. "Only me, which means someone created it specifically to help me. And there's only one person I know with that kind of money who knew about my situation. Preston didn't know what to say. I'm sorry I lied to you, but I'm not sorry I did it. Rosa's hands shook on the table. Why? Why did you do this? You barely know me. I'm just your housekeeper. Preston leaned forward. You're not just anything. You've worked for me 3 years. You've taken care of my son, my home. You were dying and I could help. That's all the reason I needed. Rosa shook her head. But I didn't want help. I wanted to handle it myself. You took that away from me. Preston met her eyes steadily. You're right. I did. Because handling it yourself meant dying, Rosa. And I couldn't watch that happen. I couldn't explain to Caleb why Miss Rosa wasn't coming anymore. I couldn't watch your daughter kill herself trying to save you. So yes, I took away your choice. I'm sorry that hurt you. But I'd do it again. Nora spoke from the window, voice cold. You treated us like charity cases, like we were too weak to solve our own problems. Preston turned to her. Your mother was dealing with a healthcare system designed to let poor people die. There was no amount of hard work that was going to save her in time. I didn't help because I thought I was better than you. I helped because I could, and not helping would have made me a coward. Rosa's voice was thick with tears. My whole life I've been looked down on. The poor woman, the housekeeper. People think I need saving, that I can't take care of myself. I've spent 45 years proving them wrong, never asking for help, never being a burden. That's all I have, my pride. And you took that away. Preston shook his head firmly. No, I didn't take anything. You're still the same person. You still worked yourself to exhaustion for your daughter. You still maintained dignity even when your body was failing. The only thing that changed is you didn't have to die to prove it. Rosa, pride shouldn't cost you your life. Rosa was crying now, silent tears streaming. I don't know how to owe someone this much. How do I ever repay this? Preston's voice was gentle. You don't. It's not a debt. You should have had insurance. You should have been able to get surgery without it bankrupting you. The system failed you. I just had money to work around that failure. You don't owe me anything. Rosa reached across the table and took his hand. I owe you everything. You gave me my life back. You gave me more time with my daughter. How is that not a debt? Preston thought carefully. Because a debt implies you took something from me. But I didn't lose anything helping you. My life is exactly the same, except now I get to know you're going to live. That's not a sacrifice. That's just basic human decency. If you want to repay me by living, by watching Nora become a doctor, by being there for Caleb, by letting yourself accept that sometimes good things can happen without strings attached. They sat in silence. Finally, Rosa spoke again. Thank you for saving my life, for caring when you didn't have to, for seeing us as human beings. I'm angry, yes, but I'm also alive, and that's because of you. Preston squeezed her hand gently. You're welcome, and you were never just the help to me. Maybe I didn't know how to show that before, but you're family, Rosa. Both of you are. He left their apartment an hour later, after more tears and difficult conversations, and the beginning of something that might eventually become peace. The relationship had changed forever. There was no going back. But maybe what they had now, complicated, messy, built on both gratitude and resentment, was more honest, more real. And as Preston drove home, he thought about Rosa's words. I don't know how to owe someone this much. He understood that feeling completely. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the best gifts were the ones that couldn't be repaid, that had to be accepted with grace, then paid forward to someone else who needed help. Months passed, like pages turning. Rosa returned to work, but Preston had adjusted her schedule. 4 hours a day, light duties only. He'd hired another housekeeper to handle heavier work, and Rosa seemed to enjoy having someone to mentor. Her health continued improving. The surgery had been complete success. She'd gained back weight, lost the exhaustion. She moved through the apartment with energy Preston had never seen, singing softly in Spanish as she worked. Nora had gone back to school. The university agreed to reinstate her scholarship after Preston made a quiet phone call explaining the situation. She was a year behind her peers, but catching up fast. One Saturday morning, 6 months after surgery, Preston woke to find Rosa in the kitchen, teaching Caleb how to make pancakes. Their laughter filled the apartment, and Preston stood in the doorway, watching, feeling something shift in his chest. His home felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. "Dad," Caleb called, "come try my pancake. I made it myself." Preston came over and took a bite of the lopsided, slightly burned pancake. "It's perfect," he said, and meant it. Rosa smiled at him, that warm smile she'd started giving him after everything, the smile that said, "We're okay now," and Preston felt gratitude wash over him. Later that day, Nora arrived with her acceptance letter to medical school. She'd been accepted into 3 programs and chosen the one in the city to stay close to her mother. Preston watched Rosa read the letter with tears streaming, watched her hold her daughter tight. "I'm so proud of you. My doctor. I'm so proud." Years would pass, but Preston would never forget that first night. The sound of water running at 3 in the morning. The girl with trembling hands washing dishes like her life depended on it. The moment everything changed. He'd thought his life was about accumulation, about building walls high enough to keep out pain. But Rosa and Nora had taught him something different. They'd shown him that the greatest wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or penthouse views. It was measured in the family you chose, in the lives you touched, in the courage to see someone drowning and dive in without hesitation. Some debts could never be repaid with money. Some gifts were meant to ripple outward, creating waves that would touch shores you'd never see. And some families, the ones built at 3 in the morning from broken pieces and impossible choices, those were the ones that lasted forever. Because they weren't held together by obligation or blood. They were held together by something stronger, the choice to love when it costs everything, and the wisdom to accept love when pride says to refuse it.